I pulled into the hospital parking lot just as the sun was setting over Vancouver's North Shore mountains. My hands were steady on the wheel, but my chest felt tight. The call from my son had come 3 hours ago. 3 hours of highway driving, replaying his broken voice in my head. Dad, they won't let me see Mia. My granddaughter, 8 years old, in the hospital for 2 weeks with what her mother's parents called complications from the flu. And my son, Derek, hadn't been allowed past the pediatric ward doors once. I found him exactly where he said he'd be. 3rd floor waiting room, corner seat by the window. He looked like he'd aged a decade since I last saw him at Christmas. His jacket was wrinkled, same one he'd been wearing in the photo he sent me 4 days ago. His beard had grown patchy and unkempt. When he saw me, he stood up too fast, knocking over an empty coffee cup. Dad. I wrapped my arms around my son. He was 42 years old, a grown man, and he was shaking. Where is she? I asked. Room 3047. Down that hall, turn left. He pointed with a trembling hand. But they've got security instructions. Linda's parents, they filed something. I don't know what it is, Dad. Some kind of order. The nurses won't tell me anything. They just keep saying I'm not authorized. Linda's parents did this? He nodded. Gerald and Patricia Morrison. After Linda died, they just took over. They made all the funeral arrangements without asking me. They took Mia from our house while I was meeting with the lawyer about Linda's estate. That was 6 weeks ago. I haven't seen my daughter since. On what grounds? They're saying I'm unstable, that I can't take care of her properly, that Linda wouldn't have wanted me to have custody. His voice cracked. Dad, Linda and I were married for 12 years. We bought a house together. We were a family. How can they just erase me like this? I looked at my son, really looked at him. He'd lost weight. His eyes were red-rimmed and hollow. This wasn't grief anymore. This was something being done to him. Have you been served with anything? Any legal documents? Just a temporary guardianship order. They got an emergency hearing 3 weeks ago. Said I was emotionally compromised, that Mia needed stability. The judge gave them temporary custody until a full hearing. That's scheduled for next month. And Mia's been sick this whole time? She was fine when they took her. Then last week, Patricia called and said Mia collapsed at school. High fever, couldn't keep food down, severe fatigue. They rushed her to Children's Hospital. He ran his hands through his hair. I tried to see her that first day. Security stopped me at the elevator. Gerald was there. He told me if I didn't leave, he'd have me arrested for violating the custody order. What did the doctors say? They won't talk to me. I'm not listed as her guardian anymore. Gerald and Patricia have full medical authority. I felt something cold settle in my stomach. Something wasn't right. People didn't just collapse from the flu and stay hospitalized for 2 weeks. And grandparents didn't block a father from his sick child unless they had something to hide. Wait here, I said. Dad, you can't. They'll call security. I walked past him without responding. Down the corridor, following the signs to the pediatric ward. The nurses' station was ahead. 2 nurses working behind computers. I approached the younger one, a woman with kind eyes and a name tag that read Sarah. Excuse me. I'm here about Mia Castellano, room 3047. She looked up. Are you family? I'm her grandfather, Thomas Castellano. I'm sorry, sir, but we have strict instructions. Only the legal guardians are authorized for information or visitation. Her father is sitting in the waiting room. He hasn't seen his daughter in 2 weeks. The nurse's expression shifted slightly. Something flickered in her eyes. Sympathy. Maybe even recognition. I understand this is difficult, but we have to follow the court order. Can you at least tell me her condition? How sick is she? I can't discuss patient information with unauthorized individuals. I reached into my jacket pocket and pulled out a single document. I'd carried it with me for years, updated it annually, kept it in my car for emergencies. I unfolded it carefully and placed it on the counter between us. This is a healthcare proxy form, signed by my son Derek Castellano, giving me medical power of attorney in situations where he cannot act on his own behalf. It was notarized 5 years ago and includes provisions for decisions regarding his minor children. The nurse picked it up, scanning the text. Her colleague leaned over to look. This gives you authority to make medical decisions for his children if he's incapacitated, Sarah said slowly. That's correct. And right now, my son is being prevented from accessing his daughter by a temporary custody order that doesn't supersede his parental rights in a medical emergency. He's not incapacitated. He's being blocked. But this document gives me legal standing to act as his proxy in medical matters concerning his children. The second nurse was already typing something into her computer. She looked up at Sarah and nodded slightly. Sarah picked up the phone. Security? This is the pediatric ward. We need you to room 3047. We have a situation with the current visitors. She paused. No, send 2 officers. And notify Dr. Patel that we have a legitimate medical proxy for the patient. She hung up and looked at me. Mr. Castellano, I need you to understand something. We've been concerned about this case. The child's condition has been inconsistent. We've documented some irregularities that we've reported to our supervising physician. What kind of irregularities? I can't say more without violating protocols. But Dr. Patel will want to speak with you. 10 minutes later, I stood outside room 3047 with 2 security officers and a hospital administrator. Through the small window in the door, I could see my granddaughter in the bed, pale and small under white sheets. A woman in her 60s sat beside her, reading a magazine. Patricia Morrison. I'd met her exactly 3 times. Twice at family events Linda had insisted on. Once at Linda's funeral where she'd glared at Derek through the entire service. The administrator knocked and opened the door. Mrs. Morrison, I need you to step outside for a moment. Patricia looked up, her face hardening when she saw me behind the administrator. What is he doing here? He has no right. Mr. Castellano has presented a valid healthcare proxy form, giving him medical authority regarding the child. We need you to step out while we verify the current custody arrangements. I have a court order, which grants you temporary guardianship. It doesn't supersede medical proxy rights held by a biological grandparent acting on behalf of the biological father. The administrator's voice was firm. Please step outside now, or we'll have security escort you. Patricia stood, her face flushed with anger. As she passed me in the doorway, she hissed, You have no idea what you're doing. That man killed my daughter. I didn't respond. I walked into the room. Mia was awake, staring at me with wide, uncertain eyes. She'd been 6 the last time I saw her, at Linda's funeral. Now she was 8, but she looked smaller than I remembered, fragile. Grandpa? I moved to her bedside. Hi, sweetheart. Is Daddy here? He's right outside. He's been trying to see you for 2 weeks. Her eyes filled with tears. Grandma Patricia said he didn't want to see me anymore. She said he was too sad about Mommy, and that seeing me made him sadder. I felt my jaw tighten. That's not true, Mia. Your dad has been here every single day. They wouldn't let him in. Can he come in now? Yes. Very soon. A doctor entered the room, a man in his 50s with gray at his temples. Mr. Castellano? I'm Dr. Patel, Mia's attending physician. Can we speak in the hall? I followed him out. Derek had arrived, standing nervously near the security officers. I nodded to him and turned to the doctor. How sick is she? I asked. Dr. Patel glanced at Derek, then back at me. Before I answer that, I need to clarify something. You have medical proxy authority? Yes, through my son. And you're requesting full disclosure of the child's medical status? Absolutely. He pulled out a tablet, tapping through screens. Mia Castellano was admitted 14 days ago with symptoms of severe gastroenteritis, dehydration, and unusual lethargy. Initial blood work showed elevated liver enzymes and signs of toxicity. We've run extensive tests. Toxicity from what? That's what concerns me. We found traces of benzodiazepines in her system, specifically diazepam. When I questioned Mrs. Morrison about it, she said the child had been having panic attacks after her mother's death and that she'd been giving her medication prescribed by their family doctor. Did you verify that prescription? I tried. Their family doctor, a Dr. Howard Brennan, confirmed he'd prescribed a very low dose of diazepam for anxiety. But the levels in Mia's blood were significantly higher than therapeutic doses for a child her size. I contacted Dr. Brennan again yesterday with the specific numbers. He was shocked. He said the prescription he wrote should have lasted 3 months with proper dosing. Mrs. Morrison claimed they'd used it all in 6 weeks. Derek's face had gone white. Are you saying they were overdosing her? I'm saying the medication levels were inappropriate. When I confronted Mrs. Morrison about it 3 days ago, she became very defensive and insisted I was misreading the labs. She demanded a second opinion from a different hospital. Dr. Patel looked at me directly. Mr. Castellano, I'm obligated to tell you that I filed a report with Child Protective Services 2 days ago. The circumstances here are suspicious. What circumstances? Mia's symptoms would improve when Mrs. Morrison wasn't here. Every time she left for the evening, Mia would perk up within hours. The next morning, after Mrs. Morrison's breakfast visits, Mia would deteriorate again. I've seen this pattern before, and it concerns me deeply. I felt my blood run cold. You think she's been giving her something? I think there's enough evidence to warrant investigation. The CPS caseworker is supposed to interview the family tomorrow. Where's Patricia Morrison now? Security escorted her to the family waiting area. Her husband was contacted and is on his way. I looked at Derek. We need to get everything documented. Every visit, every conversation, everything they've said about you. Dad, I don't understand. Why would they do this? I don't know yet, but we're going to find out. Dr. Patel cleared his throat. There's one more thing. When Mia first arrived, Mrs. Morrison insisted on being present for all medical discussions. She was very controlling about what information was shared and with whom. She also specifically requested that all communication go through her, not through Mr. Castellano, despite his parental rights. That raised red flags for me. Did she give a reason? She said Mr. Castellano was mentally unstable and that any stress might trigger a violent episode. She claimed he'd been abusive toward her daughter. Derek's voice shook. That's a lie. I never touched Linda. We had a good marriage. Ask anyone who knew us. I believe you, Dr. Patel said quietly. Because when I spoke to Mia alone yesterday, which Mrs. Morrison tried very hard to prevent, Mia told me she missed her daddy and didn't understand why he wasn't visiting. She said Grandma Patricia told her daddy had gone away because he didn't love her anymore. That's not the statement of a child who's been around an abusive parent. I turned to Derek. Go see your daughter. I'm going to make some calls. I walked back to the waiting room, pulling out my phone. I had connections in Vancouver, people I'd worked with over the years when I was still practicing law. I'd retired 8 years ago, moved to Victoria, thought I was done with courtrooms and legal battles. But family was different. Family was everything. I called Martin Chen, a lawyer who specialized in family law. We'd worked together on a custody case a decade ago. He answered on the third ring. Thomas, it's been years. Martin, I need your help. My grandson's daughter is in the hospital, and her maternal grandparents have been systematically poisoning her while blocking him from access. There was a pause. That's a serious accusation. I have a doctor willing to testify. Medical records showing inappropriate medication levels, and a pattern of behavior that's textbook Munchausen by proxy. Where are you? Children's Hospital, Vancouver. I'll be there in 30 minutes. I hung up and called someone else. Robert Haynes, private investigator, former RCMP. We'd crossed paths on several cases when I was still in practice. Robert, it's Thomas Castellano. I need deep background on 2 people, Gerald and Patricia Morrison, Vancouver. I need it fast. How fast? 24 hours. That's expensive. I don't care what it costs. What am I looking for? Financial irregularities, medical history, any previous involvement with children's services, criminal records, everything. I'll start digging. I walked back toward Mia's room. Through the window, I could see Derek sitting on the edge of her bed, holding her hand. Mia was crying, but she was smiling too. Father and daughter, reunited after 2 weeks of forced separation. Patricia Morrison stood at the end of the hallway with a tall man in an expensive suit, Gerald Morrison. They were arguing in harsh whispers. When Patricia saw me, she broke away and marched toward me. You had no right to barge in there. We have legal custody, temporary custody, which doesn't override medical proxy rights. We'll see what our lawyer says about that. I look forward to it. Gerald joined her, his face red. You're making a mistake, Castellano. Derek is in no state to take care of that child. He's depressed, unemployed, and living in a house he can barely afford. Funny, he seemed perfectly capable when Linda was alive. Linda was holding that family together. Without her, Derek is nothing. Is that what you told the judge to get temporary custody? Patricia's eyes flashed. We told the truth. That Derek was negligent, that he wasn't properly caring for Mia, that the child needed stability and proper supervision. And yet, somehow, Mia was perfectly healthy until you took custody. Now she's been hospitalized for 2 weeks with suspicious medication levels in her system. Gerald's expression shifted slightly. Just a flicker, but I caught it. The doctor prescribed that medication. Inappropriate doses. Not the levels found in her blood. We followed the prescription exactly. Then you won't mind when Child Protective Services investigates tomorrow. Patricia's face went pale. CPS? Why would they? Because Dr. Patel filed a report. Suspicious circumstances involving a child in your care. They take that very seriously in British Columbia. Gerald grabbed Patricia's arm. We're leaving. Our lawyer will handle this. They walked away quickly, Patricia's heels clicking sharply on the linoleum. I watched them disappear into the elevator. Martin Chen arrived 20 minutes later. I briefed him in the cafeteria, laying out everything I knew. He took notes on his laptop, occasionally interrupting with questions. The healthcare proxy gives you standing for medical decisions, but it won't help with the custody situation, he said. The judge granted them temporary guardianship based on their petition. We'll need to file an emergency motion to reverse that. On what grounds? Child endangerment, medical abuse. We have the doctor's testimony about inappropriate medication levels. That's strong evidence. But we need more to prove a pattern. I have an investigator digging into their background. Good. We need to show the court that granting them custody was a mistake based on false information. Martin looked up from his laptop. Thomas, this is going to get ugly. They'll fight hard. Do you know why they want custody so badly? Not yet. But I'm going to find out. Robert called me that evening. I was sitting in Derek's living room, a small 2-bedroom house in Burnaby that Derek had bought with Linda 5 years ago. It was modest but tidy, not the home of a negligent parent. Thomas, you need to hear this. Go ahead. Gerald and Patricia Morrison, married 40 years. One daughter, Linda, deceased 6 weeks ago in a car accident. Gerald is a retired accountant. Patricia is a former nurse, retired 12 years ago. He paused. Here's where it gets interesting. Linda had a life insurance policy. $500,000. The beneficiary was listed as Derek Castellano, her husband. That's standard, right? But 3 weeks before Linda died, she updated her will. The new will was drafted by a lawyer named Simon Fletcher, who happens to be Gerald Morrison's golf partner. In that new will, Linda created a trust for Mia's education and care. The trust is substantial. In addition to the life insurance, it includes Linda's inheritance from her grandmother, which was around $200,000, and it names Gerald and Patricia Morrison as trustees until Mia turns 25. So they control the money. Exactly. Derek gets nothing except whatever assets were jointly owned. The house, which has a mortgage. Their savings account, which had about $12,000 in it. But the bulk of Linda's estate goes into a trust managed by her parents. That gives them motive to keep Mia under their control. It gets better. I checked their financials. Gerald and Patricia are in serious debt. They refinanced their house 3 times in the last 8 years. Credit card debt is over $80,000. They borrowed heavily to invest in a business venture that failed spectacularly last year. They're drowning, and suddenly their daughter dies and leaves a trust they control. A trust that allows them to draw reasonable expenses for Mia's care. I pulled the trust documents. It's vague enough that they could justify significant withdrawals if they have custody. I felt everything click into place. They're using Mia to access the money. That's my read. And if Derek has custody, he'd have legal grounds to challenge the trust management. But if they maintain custody and Derek is deemed unfit, they have unrestricted access. What about Linda's will? Can we challenge it? Possibly. If we can prove she was coerced, or that she wasn't of sound mind when she signed it. But that's a long, difficult process. The faster route is to prove they're unfit guardians and get Derek's parental rights restored. Thanks, Robert. Send me everything you found. Already in your email. I hung up and looked at Derek, who'd been listening to my side of the conversation. His face was ashen. They killed her, he whispered. We don't know that. Dad, the accident. Linda went off the road on a clear day. The police said she probably fell asleep at the wheel, but Linda never fell asleep driving. She was meticulous about that, and her parents were the ones who identified the body. They made all the funeral arrangements before I even got to the hospital. What are you saying? I'm saying it's too convenient. Linda changes her will, puts her parents in control of her estate, and then she dies 3 weeks later in a suspicious accident. And now they're medicating Mia to keep her sick and dependent on them. I wanted to tell him he was being paranoid. But the pieces fit too well. Derek, I need you to think carefully. Was Linda acting strange before she died? Any odd behavior? Unusual conversations? He sat down heavily on the couch. She was stressed. She'd been arguing with her parents about money. They kept asking her for loans, claiming they were having temporary cash flow problems. Linda refused. She said they'd borrowed too much from her already and never paid it back. He rubbed his face. About a month before she died, Linda told me she was going to change her will. She wanted to make sure Mia was taken care of, if anything happened to both of us. She said her parents had been pressuring her to include them as guardians, and she was going to do it just to get them off her back. Did she mention the trust? No. She just said she was updating her will. I assumed it was standard stuff, making sure Mia's education was funded. He looked at me. I never saw the final version. After Linda died, her parents showed me the trust documents and said it was what Linda wanted. I was too numb to question it. Do you have any of Linda's personal papers? Diaries? Emails? Anything that might show her state of mind? Her laptop. It's in the bedroom. The police gave it back to me after the accident investigation. I need to look at it. Derek retrieved the laptop. I spent the next 2 hours going through Linda's emails and documents. Most of it was ordinary. Work correspondence, family photos, shopping lists. But then I found a folder labeled Legal Stuff. Inside was a draft of a will, dated 2 months before Linda died. In this version, Derek was named as the primary beneficiary and guardian of Mia. There was no trust, no mention of her parents as trustees. There was also an email exchange between Linda and a different lawyer, not Simon Fletcher, a woman named Catherine Park. The emails were dated 5 weeks before Linda's death. Linda had written, "Catherine, my parents are pressuring me to use their lawyer friend to update my will. They keep saying it's important to protect Mia if something happens to me and Derek, but I don't trust their motives. They've been asking me for money constantly. Can you recommend someone independent?" Catherine Park had responded with a recommendation and a warning. "Linda, if you're feeling pressured about your estate planning, that's a red flag. Make sure you're comfortable with any changes you make and that they reflect your wishes, not someone else's. If you need a second opinion on any documents, I'm happy to review them." The last email from Linda to Catherine was dated 3 weeks before her death. "Thanks for the referral. I met with Simon Fletcher yesterday, my parents' friend. He drew up the trust documents. Something feels off about it, but I can't put my finger on what. Can I send you a copy to review?" There was no response from Catherine, and no indication that Linda ever sent the documents. I sat back, staring at the screen. Linda had doubts. She'd been trying to get a second opinion. And then she died before she could. I called Martin Chen again. Martin, I need you to subpoena Linda Castellano's medical records from the 6 weeks before her death. And I need you to find a lawyer named Catherine Park. She was corresponding with Linda before she died. She might have information. What are you looking for in the medical records? Toxicology. I want to know if Linda was being drugged before the accident. Thomas. That's a serious implication. I know. But I think Gerald and Patricia Morrison killed their own daughter to access her estate. And now they're using Mia to maintain control of the trust. If you're right, we're not just talking about a custody battle. We're talking about murder and child abuse. I know. That's why we need to move fast. The next day, the CPS caseworker arrived at the hospital. Her name was Jennifer Moss, a woman in her 40s with a no-nonsense demeanor. She interviewed Mia privately, then spoke with Dr. Patel. She pulled Derek aside for over an hour. When she emerged, she found me in the waiting room. Mr. Castellano, I understand you're acting as medical proxy for Mia? That's correct. I've reviewed the medical records and Dr. Patel's concerns. I'm also aware of the custody situation. She sat down across from me. Based on what I've seen, I'm recommending an immediate investigation into the Morrisons' guardianship. The medication levels in Mia's system are concerning, and her recovery pattern suggests environmental factors. What does that mean for custody? I'm filing an emergency motion to suspend the temporary guardianship order until a full investigation is complete. In the meantime, I'm recommending supervised visitation only for the Morrisons. Derek Castellano will be granted immediate custody with support services. When will this take effect? I'm presenting it to the judge this afternoon. If approved, Derek can take Mia home tonight. It happened faster than I expected. The judge reviewed Jennifer Moss's report, Dr. Patel's medical testimony, and Martin Chen's emergency motion. By 5 p.m., the temporary guardianship was suspended. Derek was granted full custody with a restraining order preventing the Morrisons from unsupervised contact with Mia. Gerald and Patricia tried to fight it. Their lawyer argued that Derek was unfit, that the medical concerns were exaggerated, that they were being unfairly targeted. But the judge was unmoved. The evidence was too strong. That night, Derek brought Mia home. She was still weak, but her color was already better. Dr. Patel had prescribed a medically supervised withdrawal from the benzodiazepines, carefully titrating her doses to prevent complications. Within a week, Mia was a different child. Her energy returned. She smiled more. She asked about school and her friends. Robert's investigation continued. He uncovered more financial irregularities in the Morrisons' accounts. Large withdrawals that coincided with Linda's will being updated. Payments to Simon Fletcher that seemed excessive for simple estate planning. And, most damning, evidence that Patricia Morrison had refilled Mia's diazepam prescription 4 times in 6 weeks using 3 different pharmacies. Martin filed a formal complaint with the police, citing potential fraud and child endangerment. The RCMP opened an investigation. 2 weeks later, Robert made his most significant discovery. He'd been digging into Linda's accident, pulling traffic camera footage and police reports. On the day Linda died, her car had been serviced at a garage owned by Gerald Morrison's brother. The service was logged as routine maintenance, but Robert found receipts showing that the brake lines had been inspected and replaced. 3 days after that service, Linda's brakes failed on a steep hill. She crashed into a concrete barrier at 60 kilometers per hour. The police accident report noted possible mechanical failure, but concluded driver error was more likely. Robert had the wrecked car, which was still in a police impound lot, re-examined by an independent mechanic. The brake lines showed evidence of deliberate scoring, small cuts that would weaken the lines and cause them to fail under pressure, but not immediately. Someone sabotaged Linda's brakes, Robert told me. And the service records put Gerald Morrison's brother in the perfect position to do it. The police investigation expanded. Gerald Morrison's brother was brought in for questioning. Cell phone records showed multiple calls between Patricia, Gerald, and the brother in the week before Linda's death. Financial records showed a payment of $15,000 from the Morrisons to the brother 2 days after Linda's funeral. 4 weeks after I first walked into that hospital, Gerald and Patricia Morrison were arrested. The charges included fraud, child endangerment, and conspiracy to commit murder. Simon Fletcher, the lawyer who drafted Linda's trust, was charged as an accessory after evidence showed he'd knowingly created documents under duress. Gerald Morrison's brother was charged with criminally negligent homicide and tampering with a motor vehicle. The case made headlines. Grandparents accused of killing daughter for inheritance read one. Vancouver couple charged in murder for trust scheme read another. Derek and I attended every court date, watching Gerald and Patricia sit in the defendant's box. No longer the grieving grandparents, but criminals facing life in prison. The trial lasted 8 weeks. The prosecution presented the financial evidence, the medical records, the sabotaged brake lines, the cell phone records. They called Derek to testify about Linda's state of mind before her death. They called Dr. Patel to explain how Mia had been systematically overdosed. They called Catherine Park, who testified that Linda had expressed concerns about her parents' financial pressure. Gerald Morrison's brother took a plea deal and testified against Gerald and Patricia. He broke down on the stand, saying he'd never meant for anyone to die, that Gerald had convinced him it was just a scare tactic to make Linda more cooperative. In the end, the jury found Gerald and Patricia Morrison guilty on all counts. Gerald received 25 years for conspiracy to commit murder and fraud. Patricia received 30 years, with the judge citing her medical background and deliberate poisoning of her granddaughter as aggravating factors. I'll never forget the moment the verdict was read. Patricia screamed that they'd been trying to protect Mia, that Derek was the real danger. Gerald just sat silent, staring at his hands. Derek cried, not from relief or satisfaction, but from grief. The people who'd killed his wife and tried to poison his daughter had been Linda's parents, the people she'd loved and trusted. Mia was in therapy, processing the trauma of what had happened. She didn't understand the full details. We shielded her from the worst of it, but she knew her grandparents had hurt her, that they wouldn't be coming back. A year later, Mia was thriving. She'd gone back to school, made new friends, joined a soccer team. Derek had gotten a new job, working as a project manager for a construction firm. The life insurance money and Linda's estate, now properly administered, had secured Mia's future and paid off the mortgage. I visited every month, driving from Victoria to Vancouver. Sometimes we'd have dinner, just the three of us. Sometimes Mia would show me her schoolwork or tell me about soccer practice. Simple, ordinary moments that felt precious because we'd come so close to losing them. Derek and I never talked about revenge. What we'd done wasn't about vengeance. It was about protecting family, about uncovering truth, about ensuring that Mia had the chance to grow up safe and loved. Justice, I'd learned long ago in my legal career, wasn't always about punishment. Sometimes it was about restoration, about taking broken pieces and fitting them back together into something whole. Mia would carry scars from what happened. She'd lost her mother and learned that people who should protect children sometimes hurt them instead. But she also learned that when things went wrong, there were people who would fight for her. Her father, her grandfather, doctors and social workers and lawyers who saw the truth and acted on it. That was the real victory. Not the convictions or the prison sentences, but the fact that Mia was home, healthy, and healing. Derek and I were in the backyard one Sunday afternoon, watching Mia practice soccer drills, when he turned to me. Dad, I never thanked you properly. For everything you did, you don't need to thank me. Yes, I do. If you hadn't shown up that day, if you hadn't pushed back, they would have gotten away with it. Mia would be. He couldn't finish the sentence. You're my son. Mia is my granddaughter. There was never a question of whether I'd help. The only question was how. That document you brought, the healthcare proxy. You've been carrying that for years? I updated it every time we updated our estate planning. Your mother and I always wanted to make sure we could help if something went wrong. Mom would be proud of what you did. I thought about my wife, gone 3 years now to cancer. She'd loved Derek and Mia fiercely. If she'd been alive, she would have been right beside me, fighting just as hard. She'd be proud of you too, I said. You didn't give up on Mia. Even when they tried to break you, even when they made you doubt yourself, you kept fighting. I had you backing me up. You would have kept fighting without me. You're a good father, Derek. Don't ever let anyone make you doubt that. Mia scored a goal against the tree she was using as a target and turned to us, beaming. We applauded. She took a theatrical bow. In that moment, everything felt right. Not perfect, the scars were still there, but right. A father, a grandfather, a child. A family that had survived and found its way back to each other. That was what mattered. Not the courtroom victories or the headlines. Just this. A Sunday afternoon, a backyard, a little girl playing soccer while her father and grandfather watched. Justice was this. Family whole and healing. That was the fight worth winning.